I would like to take a moment and nominate Bob Moore. I've worked very closely with Bob over the last couple of years as chair. He's done an unbelievably great job as far as I'm concerned. I deal a lot with board chairs from time to time. And I think he deserves our support and deserves to continue in that position for another year.
Amen. I mean, second.
Is there, just going to say, is there a second? We have a second. Are there further nominations? Are there further nominations? Hearing none. All those in favor of electing Bob Moore, Chairman of the Regional District 13 Board of Education, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? I declare, Mr. Moore, you have been elected chair of the board.
It's like winning the lottery. Congratulations, Bob.
Or going to prison, one or the other. But anyway, Bob, I will turn it over to you.
Right, and we need a nomination for secretary.
I would nominate Norm Hicks. He's a wealth of information. That's my reason.
Do we have a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second that.
Are there any other nominations? Thank you. All those in favor of Norm Hicks as secretary?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations once again.
Thank you. Thank you all for your support, your continued support.
And we need nominations for treasurer. Anybody would have a motion to nominate somebody for treasurer?
I'd be delighted to nominate Christine Garaci for treasurer. Done an excellent job, slid right into that position. MBA and all that stuff. She's got the goods. So I think she deserves another term.
I'll second.
Any
Second.
other nominations for treasurer? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Congratulations, everybody. Thank you. Now we're back into the regular meeting. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're just gonna table. We have time for public comment. Ken, do we have any public comment out there?
No one has called in.
You? A motion to approve the minutes from our June 24th special session meeting.
So move.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
The next board meeting, regular board meeting is August 12th at 7 p.m. in the library or remotely, wherever we're doing by then. But we have talked about the need to have several meetings, maybe every other week until we get our plan done. And of course, we probably need to approve or just accept the July 24th reopening plan. I think the board needs to be behind that fully. So we'll probably have to have a meeting a couple days before the 24th. So we'll pick out those dates as we go ahead in the next couple of weeks. I know that there was going to also start to have some committee meetings as well to get back on track. And I think utilization will be probably next Thursday. Andrew and Bob, are you around?
Yeah, that time worked for me.
No.
Day, 'cause I don't-
Bob,
at a time.
yeah, Bob, I really couldn't hear you. I was trying to
Oh.
get my volume up.
I was
Sorry.
trying to see if we could have a utilization meeting on the next Thursday, the 9th, around 6 o'clock.
Next Thursday? Yeah, I'd be available.
Okay, it'll be a remote meeting, so you can be wherever you're gonna be.
Oh, good. I'll be out of state.
All right.
Yeah.
Um,
And then if Lucy and Victor could just send some briefs to Corey for student achievement the following week.
You wanna say that?
I have some background noise here, so I'm gonna mute.
Okay.
Lucy and Victor, if you could just, sorry, Bob's in the room with me here. If you can reach out to Corey about a good date for you for student achievement, not next week, but the week after, that would be great. I would appreciate it.
Do you think that we need an ERC meeting just to talk about, because I don't know, I've always kind of considered that finance committee.
Am I on again?
Yeah.
The next item is the review of the 2019-2020 Strategic Coherence Plan. Kath asked us that we can table this to our next meeting after we get a chance to go through student achievement. All in favor? Tabling? I can't hear anybody. Okay. The next item is the fall 2020 reopening guidelines. Kath? You wanna-
Sure. Thanks, Bob. We received those guidelines on Monday, and we need to submit a plan to the State Department, as Bob indicated, by the 24th of July. And what I'd like to do is just for the board, just give a brief overview of what that reopening template requires. And ultimately, what we're doing is we're looking at our strategic plan for reopening and recovery, what we've already put in place, cross-referencing it with the reopening plan that we received on Monday. Also considering some of the feedback that we're getting from unions, and this certainly isn't unique to District 13, the CEA, which is, well, obviously CEA, the Connecticut Education Association, as well as AFT, is not seeing the plan as one that is supportive of the health and well-being of teachers. So there's been a press release on that, and I anticipate that there may be some other unions that will have some public pushback regarding the plan, and I would assume that in the next week we're going to see some action there. Commissioner Cardona has a webinar next week where he's broadly invited teachers, parents. I'll send the link to you as board members. They're opening it up to the first 1,000 people who want to participate. So I have a feeling I'm going to review this plan with you as it stands right now, but I think the next week is going to be pretty significant in terms of questions and challenges of the plan. So potentially we'll see some modifications, but let me share what that plan looks like at this time. Okay, so the plan is called, hang on, it's got 3 A's, hold on, let me go back. Adapt, advance, and achieve. So as I mentioned to you, I kind of jumped into this already in terms of our process for finalizing District 13's plan. As you know, we surveyed staff and parents. One of the things that we saw in our most recent survey from our staff is a much higher level of concern regarding their sense of safety in returning to in-school teaching and learning. We sent surveys to parents and to staff, and on Monday when we received the plan from the state, we learned that they too will be sending out a survey that they want all the districts across the state to be sending. You know, I guess it's a good thing that once parents and staff are aware of exactly what the plan is, they'll have something to really respond to there. what we need to talk about in the plan that we're submitting is what our educational design is going to look like. And there are a couple of areas that for tonight I want to point out. A design that the state is encouraging is something that's called stable cohorts. And they're encouraging stable cohorts in grades K through 8. And the state talks a lot about K through 8, which has made people question whether or not we plan to have pre-K. At this time, we do plan to have pre-K. We understand that meeting the guidelines as set by this plan for pre-K students may be quite challenging, especially the expectation that all students wear masks throughout the school day. The stable cohort plan essentially is, or the design is, that groups of students are kept together and travel together throughout the school day. This essentially is what we have in our elementary schools anyway. But if you have a classroom of kids who then some kids are going to chorus, so they're kids from a bunch of different classes that are going to chorus or to band, or as we move to the middle school when students are changing classes, that makes it really difficult to maintain the stable cohort design. I think the state's intention is, to the extent possible, keeping groups of students together so that in the event that there were a student who was diagnosed with COVID, that it would be easier to do contact tracing and to isolate students. There also, we do know that the trending across the country is a 50% population of parents who are saying that they're seriously considering not sending their children to school, which means that we need to look at how we would provide distance learning as well as in-person learning. The State Department of Education has created something called the Learning Hub, and you can go on the state's website to see what this is, which is intended to have materials for parents and students online. Some schools have talked about the use of the Learning Hub as a way for basically parents to provide their own at-home distance learning. That is not our intention at this time. We've already begun developing our Distance 2.0 model. And the hybrid model would be basically what I think we'll be doing, which is in school teaching and learning as well as out of school. And the state has talked about this kind of a process by which, if we had what they're considering right now low risk, so they believe that all students can be back in school full time. If we get to the point where there's moderate risk, the state is talking about a plan where we could reduce the number of students in school and have more students involved in distance learning. I'll refrain from commenting on the health and safety of that, but that's what the plan looks like at this point. Another facet of the plan that we have to communicate is just our communication plan. And the other day in the planning and response team meeting, I credited Ken Petrasco, who at the start of this said, let's just develop a framework. So regardless of how this goes, we have a framework that we follow. We will continue to follow our Wednesday update for people. We just created a new mailbox for people to submit questions to called Reopen 20. The letter that went home to parents today shared that email address with them so they can submit questions, and then at our Tuesday planning and reopening or planning and response meeting, we can address the questions that are sent to us. Staff has been encouraged to reach out directly to their school principal with any questions, concerns, or ideas they have. What I'd like to ask the board to join me in is, in the next couple weeks, having some focus groups, kind of some of us, Bob and I had done this when we were meeting with PTOs about kind of our reorganization plan for schools. I'd like to do this by school to invite parents to participate in a virtual focus group. I think it's critically important that we hear from parents not only in via surveys, but through a focus group, and would really appreciate if I had a couple of board members who were able to participate with me. The communication plan also has to include every facet of our program, especially the ways in which we are going to address and follow certain health-related protocols. In the area of operations, there are a few kind of sub areas that we will need to address. I did talk to you about the stable cohorting, our child nutrition program, which we already have underway at this time, and will continue to provide free and reduced price lunches to all students who are eligible. Transportation, I believe that I had mentioned this earlier, that the transportation expectations have been very much relaxed in comparison to what we had originally heard for summer school, which was a bus monitor on every bus, seating for students very spread out, and temperature taking on the bus. Basically, what we're being told is that because of the low risk rate that we're in right now, if that continued into the fall, that we would anticipate full capacity or close to full capacity on our buses. Our feedback from parents indicated a high percentage, close to 40% of parents who responded to the survey saying that they would be able to transport their child to school, especially if there were a provision by which they could drop them off a little bit earlier and pick them up a little bit after the end of the school day. The health practices and protocols areas, we just need to identify what we have ordered, how many masks, what type of masks, the different type of hand sanitizer that we're using, the face shields, the gowns, the sneeze guards. So everything that we've ordered for supplies that specifically relate to COVID will be outlined in the plan. The process by which we will report illnesses, we're asking people in this plan to do self-checking at home, and that when they come into the building, also self-reporting that they are not experiencing any of the COVID symptoms, or if they have been around anyone who is sick, or if they themselves are sick, they're the protocol that they need to follow for that. The area of addressing vulnerable populations, I will say that this is for us right now, in particular with our staff, really determining what are the conditions that would qualify someone for not coming back to work because of a health condition that they have or someone else has. But beyond an identified health condition, we also have people who are not comfortable returning to the work environment. And so we are working, well, we're all working with our legal counsel to get greater guidance on what provisions there will be for staff who fall into that category, and whether or not that would be an FMLA leave or paid leave. What's important, well, it's important for many reasons, but in particular, we need to know our staffing. We need to know who is available to support and teach our children. And in all of those areas, we will share the protocols, basically protocols that will be mandated that we use in our schools. And the plan also includes what our academic program is will look like, special education, English language learners. And while some of the, I'm going to say nuances, which I'm saying nuances because our curricular design will be our curricular design. We have a scope and sequence in every grade. The nuance, which will be, and I guess this is kind of, it's significant. I'm calling it a nuance, but potentially significant is when we see where our students are performing and what kind of intervention is needed for students. And then potentially what staffing patterns may arise because of that. And this is a hard thing to predict until our students come back. One of the things that's been recommended is that, and you know this because you've all been on the board, the system that we use for assessing students so that when they come back in the fall, within the first month of school, we have done assessments to determine kind of where students are performing and where their skills are. And we're being encouraged not to jump into a plethora of assessments right when kids get back and to do some kind of real-time assessments, but it will be necessary for us to determine what students need intervention and support. The final area that is expected and talked about in the plan talks about family and student engagement. I have talked at length about the social emotional learning and mental health support, an area that I feel very confident in because we have a developed plan in district. What we will do with that plan is to make some modifications, adjustments and enhancements that will address the area that we anticipate we will see with students, which will most likely be heightened school anxiety or school avoidance, difficulty with social recalibration, potential just fear of illness and fear of getting sick. When prior to COVID-19, when we've had special education summits in district, and we actually had a session that was specifically on school avoidance. And the research that was shared with us at the time was that many students who are experiencing high degrees of school avoidance, the underlying cause of that is a fear of being sick, getting sick, or dying. So we anticipate that we will see an uptick in that and an intensifying of that in our students who already experience school avoidance. The board is apprised of the partnering that we're doing with Dolphin Days. They have just submitted to the state to expand their childcare at Brewster School. We'll look carefully at what our after-school activities are. I will say that after-school activities has not been a priority area that we've been looking at this time. Athletics, the CIAC has indicated that we are ready to move forward with athletics in the fall. And that includes all sports, soccer, football, cross country. Staffing and personnel in this area, the state wants to be sure to the degree that we can that we have qualified and certified professionals in every area, but understand that there may need to be some leeway in order for us to be fully staffed. In the area of professional development, what we're encouraged to do is to really target our professional development in the areas that will enhance staff understanding of how to monitor and use all the precautionary and preventive methods, as well as addressing social and emotional learning support and mental health support for students. And from our perspective as District 13, how to enhance teacher and staff's understanding of various types of technology so that we're able to provide enhanced distance learning in the fall, because we know regardless of the plan, distance learning will be a part of that entire plan. will just quickly pull up, as I said to you, that this is kind of the general outline for what we need to do for the state's plan. If you have time, you might want to take a quick look at it. Oh, let me get out of that. Let's make that smaller. And I have reviewed this with the board before, and we received feedback last week from our consultants at Bloom Shapiro, who, oh, geez, how did I do that? Sorry. Oh.
Nice
Okay,
desktop.
Ken, I don't know. I don't know how I just did this. Sorry about that, people. Ken, can you figure out what I'm doing here?
Yep, I'm trying to remote in now.
I don't know why this is happening.
Catherine, while he's trying to get that squared away, I had one question.
Ken, are
it's
you out
something-
there? Hello, Ken.
Yep, I'm trying to remote into your computer now to see.
Don't know why I'm trying to share my screen again. I don't know why that's happening. Okay, maybe before we move to just going back to the plan that we've already developed, if you have any questions, general feedback on the outline of the state plan. I know that Andrew, you were able to read it pretty carefully. I'm pretty sure that Norm and Bob have some familiarity with it, and just curious if other people have been able to review the plan at all, or if you have any general feedback that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I have, can you hear me? Because I had started to ask a question earlier.
Can you hear Bob?
Bob, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Just now, yeah.
Okay, so the question I have, and it's something that kind of bothers me, is we talk about, well, we'll get the masks and we'll provide the PPE, and people will use it, and et cetera. Fitting dust masks to be effective, actually is supposed to be fitted so that you know what size fits you and how to put it on and how to use it. And so my question is, and I know that's going to be a huge challenge, but in one of my prior jobs where I was in charge of industrial hygiene, I used to fit test 150 employees every 6 months on 3 or 4 different types of respirators. So I know what it entails. My question is, just even beyond the fit testing, I go into stores or I go out in public and I see people that have no clue how to wear a dust mask. And they got the mask, it's doing absolutely no good for them. And so I was just wondering, do we have anything in our plan for taking the time to show the teachers how to use it, and then how are we going to teach the children, particularly the youngsters down in kindergarten and first grade, and so that's a concern I have.
Thank you, and that's a great point. The a part of the requirement is in-person and or virtual training on several areas, including, how to properly wear a mask. What we talked about today as an administrative team is taking some of our professional development days from the school year and putting that into August, so that we offer people a span of days where they come in, we do in-person training on the areas that we need to review with them, including, you know, I wasn't calling it fit testing, but because people can wear their own masks, there are going to be people who come in wearing their Boston Red Sox homemade masks and other people who are coming in with N95s that really should be fit tested. And I don't know, you know, you and Andrew are probably best can address whether a poorly fit N95 is better than a homemade Red Sox mask. But the requirement that is whenever anyone from the state is talking about this plan, critical features, all students, all day, face coverings for everyone. Those are the three things that are being talked about. I appreciate that comment, Bob, and really just today we were talking about this kind of drop-in summer training protocol where we're using days that staff would have been paid for anyway. And another serious consideration I have is just the psychological phenomena of people walking back into these buildings. There are people who have not been into a school building since March 13th. And we've discussed this as an administrative team, what it's been like for all of us to come back into the school, to reacclimate, to make sure we have a mask on. How are we interacting with the handful of people who are in the building, as opposed to how we will manage the dynamic when we have buildings filled with kids and adults. I really would appreciate any ideas, questions, concerns as a Board of Education from those of you who are parents in the district. Any feedback you have at this point.
I was more curious about what we would, can you hear me okay? Sorry. For those kids that would be, you know, get like exemptions for face masks, you know, or like maybe, you know, there's a way that children who aren't able to wear face masks, maybe like face shields are more possible. But for more of those high risk kids, maybe we could have like like what would be expected of them in terms of PPE. And then two, like almost like, I really hate to put more work to it, but have like their own communication plan. Because I think, or maybe that should be like its own focus group, actually, like maybe like, you know, the special needs like community. Cause I think a lot of those parents are particularly worried, and, you know, there's just like 1,000 questions that go through your head of like, how is this gonna work? What about this? What about this? So I think maybe that would be helpful.
Great idea. Thanks, Christine. We'll do that as a separate focus group.
I think it's pretty important also to put out there for staff and for parents, like that using the mask correctly is important. So like this came up yesterday at the vote, like there were people that were working there that had their masks under their noses. And like, that is my like biggest pet peeve as a healthcare worker, that like, that's not appropriate. And it, especially if it's our staff, like it shouldn't be tolerated. And then there were people yesterday that had a face mask instead, a face shield instead of a mask. And that does not take the place of a mask, as far as I understand. So I just think that those things like need to be specific. And I mean, I know it's going to be hard for kids, and I think every parent's different. I know some people who are telling me they're not going to send their kids back if they have to wear a mask. And I think that that's everyone's prerogative. personally, like, we are trying different types of masks in our house, and then like starting to make the kids wear them and get used to them. Like we have some of those gaiters that like go around the neck and just pull up, and my kids seem to tolerate those a little bit better. So maybe we could throw some ideas out to parents, and also are parents going to be expected to provide the masks, and if they are, that's fine, but also we have to have some sort of a backup in case the kid forgets it, or they sneeze, or it falls on the floor, or things like that. And then I was just also wondering, who is our COVID liaison? Because that was in that whole document thing. Do we have one?
We haven't designated a person yet, Missy. And, as I shared with the board early on, that I felt that was a very appropriate role for a person in our HR department. And we're in the process of interviewing. And so for right now, we're kind of doing a team approach to that. Some districts are using their head nurse. I think that's an enormous responsibility for a school nurse. And in other districts, they're using their special education coordinator or director of special ed. As Jen is getting summer school off the ground, it was not a responsibility that I was going to give her right away. So we've kind of been using a team approach to that at this point, but I will designate someone with that role. And I'm hopeful that we'll have a HR candidate who can get started by the beginning of August and have that designation and carry it out.
And then the only other question I had is, it talks about not letting volunteers or parents in the building as best as possible. So in regards to Lyman, are we thinking about like a drive-by pickup and drop off like they do at Brewster and Memorial?
We're really looking at, well, the drop off and pickup, which was a big topic of conversation for us today, because we think that the volume of parent drop off and pickup is going to increase significantly. So we could be talking about doing really kind of shifting the times for drop off and pickup. And then Lyman in particular, there's one route in and one route out. So what that would look like. And, we just keep reminding ourselves that this is something that's not going to last forever. And that if it's extreme, it will be extreme for, I don't want to say a short period of time, but probably for a finite period of time if this plan actually comes to fruition.
One of the things that we talked about, I was listening to the board chair the other day, is that we probably need to have the mask as a policy of the board in order to give it the strength to be enforced. And I think there's probably the single most required item in the whole plan is to have masks, so that we need to probably excuse me, have that make that as a policy of the board, so that it gives the teachers and the faculty the strength to enforce it.
Were they talking about any other policies of the board at that CABE meeting?
Attendance, and the issue of not coming back to school and keeping track of attendance. They thought that the policies that are in place need to probably have some waivers in order to address some of the issues like attendance, transportation, stuff like that. And so I think it's one of the things we need to be looking at over the summer is, and as we get, to the final plan, which do we have to make any changes in our policies? And I think there was questions about coming to school if you're sick. I think the policy though is more in the regulation under that is probably where that's more focused.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, they didn't think there was that many policies that had to be adopted, mostly stuff that had to have waivers.
As we're
So
on
is
this, and Andrew, I know you're ready to speak. I just want to add one thing as I brought up the statement from CEA and AFT. If the teachers feel that there is a change to their kind of their working condition, it will involve impact bargaining. So, we were able to navigate the school closure from March to June through an MOU. As we go into the school year, where potentially we would be asking teachers to do two things simultaneously, in-person learning and distance learning, that is a condition of impact bargaining. So I think that we could very possibly be seeing that conversation on the horizon very soon.
I guess I'll speak now. So I have a lot of questions. Some of them obviously aren't answerable tonight. I have reticence about this whole plan to begin with. I think that while there are considerations for the kids and the emotional and social well-being, that tends to be the position that's being touted as the most significant in driving kids back into school. I will say that from a personal experience going to an emergency department where there are all kinds of protocols and maintenance of social distancing and mask wearing, and knowing that there's the potential for getting infected, that can, I think, be even more impactful from a social emotional well-being standpoint than being out of school. So I think there are risks and benefits as far as how we're viewing this approach. It's not easy when you see every classmate have a mask on, your teacher have a mask on, that you're not allowed to hug your classmates, or you're being told to stay at a certain distance away from them. I think people will come to realize that that type of environment is not necessarily as emotionally supportive as you might otherwise hope for. So I have general reservations, but I have specific questions tonight. I think more from a operational standpoint, and I think how we can address things, or how we can help moving forward in the next couple of weeks. One of the main questions that I have is going to be our workforce employment, and how we're going to address the, I think, real potential that there are a lot of teachers that are not going to want to put themselves at what I would consider a fairly significant risk. What you're asking teachers to do is to come back to work in a highly populated environment with kids who are largely, if they are infected, are largely going to be asymptomatic, and who aren't going to adhere to social distancing requirements as well as you would like. So I can understand their fears, and I think that that's a real concern. And so my question from that standpoint would be, when will we have a fairly good estimate of the number of teachers that potentially aren't coming back, so that we can address those concerns, both from a staffing standpoint, from a resource allocation standpoint. So that's my first. I have more after that, but the other thing that I think we mentioned was the student assessments, and trying to get a feel for how students are doing and where they are from the last couple of months. And it might be worthwhile considering to doing some type of student assessments on a more one-to-one or one to small group basis over the summer, so that we don't have to do those as immediately when school starts, and so that we also know what we're dealing with when we come into the school in the fall period of time, and so that we can kind of know how to keep ourselves up to date on that front. I think that we had mentioned stuff about policies as far as masks. Bob, I would definitely agree with you that we need to have a policy in place that I think is, adheres to what the state guidelines are for recommendation. I think that there are a lot of nuances in that policy that are going to be difficult. So for instance, the medical exemption form for having a mask, I think is particularly tricky. I would say that there are very few, if almost zero, medical conditions where you can't wear a mask. It's very few. And so I think, finding that list and adhering to that guideline is going to be difficult, because I could foresee a lot of parents justifying not wearing masks for their kids based on some underlying, medical condition. In addition to that, the policy, I think, has to address larger congregations of students. In particular, I think this is going to apply to any music, sports types activity. I personally don't see how you can conduct a football game or basketball game and have mask or wear a mask. I think it would violate the mask policy if you put one in place. And so I think that we also should consider which sports we are willing to allow kids to participate in the fall, and not consider it as an all or none thing, but really prioritize what sports we feel like we can maintain social distancing components, and try to get around some of the other issues with some of the other sports. So in addition to that, I think there's going to be a lot of issues around the protocols for sending kids home. I mean, one of the difficult things with figuring out who is symptomatic from COVID is that it presents with a lot of variation. I think people have this classic, idea in mind of somebody that's very short of breath and coughing and has flu-like symptoms. That's not necessarily always the case, and I think it's a little unclear, are we going to send every kid that has a cold home, and not let kids who have colds come to school? That's probably going to be the case, because you're not going to be able to tell, and it's going to be really difficult to figure out which kids, need to be there and which kids don't. If that's the case, we also have to plan for the fact that, we're going to be having a significant population of students that are going to be out for evaluation for testing, and there's going to be a very kind of intermittent kind of process in their care and also in their schooling during that time period. I think most of that is probably the major points I have right now. I do think that, Bob, Martina, you made a good point about the mask wearing and so that also is another part of the policy, is what types of masks we feel like are going to be acceptable and should be worn by both students and staff. Because Bob, I know there are a lot of different types of masks. And some of them do a good job, and some of them are just really there for kind of just blocking your own spit a little bit. But if they're aerosolized particles, they're not gonna help you that much. And it's very different when you're out in the open outside than when you're in a more of a confined kind of area, because your ability to breathe those particles is just enhanced, and the concentration is enhanced. And so I guess I'll end this just by saying, I think, I just look at this and I think that this is just a huge task. I really think that we need to dedicate significant resources now. When I say that, I think we need to consider as a board, can we bring back a teacher group that's willing and able to work a 9 to 5 period of time during this summer month to help with all of these tasks and really clarifying all of these issues. I don't know enough about teaching contracts, what the requirements are over the summer. But I do know that I don't think it's fair to ask a ton of people on a volunteer basis for something that's their job. And so I think we have, if we are asking just over and above of these teachers, even during the summer, but we're not paying them, I just don't think that's right. And so I think we really should consider about how we address those things. And Kath, I know you probably have thoughts on all of these things, and I'll stop now. I'm sure I'll have lots of other thoughts in the future, but those were just some initial things.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'm going to answer really quickly, and then Bob Yamartino, I see that you have things to say. So I'll quickly just comment on two of the points you made, that how do we determine what workforce we have? I need to know who's on the bench and what is the admissible reason for returning to work. I also need to know what are my students that are coming back. Because those two things and that formula, so it's really, or if I have a student body that's reduced by 50%, I'm still going to need people to be doing distance learning. Oh, can you not hear me?
It's really, it's like echoey.
Choppy.
Yeah, choppy.
Is yours off, Bob?
His is muted.
Now it's better though.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think it might have been because you
just
were moving your hands in front of the speaker.
And I had also turned it down, but just really getting a clear picture. What is, your question was like, when are you going to know? I need to know what the protocol is by which we make the determination. You do not have to return to work, or you do have to return to work, and someone says, well, I'm not going to, then I'm making the choice, I'm not coming back to work at all. So I think we all as districts need to know beyond what I did, which was just a first an informal survey, not knowing what the plan is. Now that we know what the plan is and what will be expected of teachers, I think this is the time before the end of July to know what are we talking about in terms of our workforce. The last point that you brought up about, we can't do this. We can't ask people to do this voluntarily. Today, what we discussed was the identification of work groups. So what we have done as a team of administrators, kind of through this planning and response process, is to identify certain areas that we need to either build a protocol, make decisions. I'll take this one for instance, which is classroom layout. I need a small group of teachers in each building who are my kind of classroom layout teachers. What we talked about today was paying people the rate that we pay people in the summer to do curriculum writing, which is $3 an hour. If we use that, we have directed funds for staff to work on curriculum writing. This is the curriculum writing. So we have designated funds or designated areas in the budget to pay staff at an hourly rate to do work that is beyond school hours. What that can mean is when we get to the point later in the school year where I'm saying, it's time for us to revise the social studies curriculum and expend our curriculum money on reopening preparedness in our work groups. I just want to be sure that you agree with this. I had reached out to the union, both the rep at the state level and to Craig, the teachers union president. I also think there are people in other bargaining units and people who aren't union employees who should be contributing to some of these kind of work groups and problem solving, because it's the perspective of many in a manageable group that is going to help us to put a plan together that actually works. So that was our discussion today. We agree completely. This is not something that we can expect people to do voluntarily. Bob Martino.
Yeah, so thank you. Kathy, you were breaking up quite a bit throughout that, so not sure exactly what caused it. So one of the things that I wanted to say, and I think Bob covered most of it, was there's probably more than just 1 or 2 policies. We're probably talking a half a dozen policies. So earlier in this meeting, we looked at scheduling some meetings. I think we need to schedule a policy committee meeting now, at least get it on the calendar so that we can figure out when we're all gonna get together and hash through these policies, even though at this point we may not know specifically what those are gonna say. I think we need to start scheduling and start to think about it and get a complete list of policies. Christine, I think you asked but didn't get an answer regarding an ERC meeting. And I think we should have an ERC meeting in order to look at what is some of the cost implications of the additional equipment we're going to be ordering, the PPE. And to Andrew's point, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We need to make sure we get this plan laid out and that the appropriate resources are being brought to bear and being paid for it. So we need to understand as this goes what the implications are. And I know that Kathy, Kim will be working on doing a lot of the cost layouts and stuff like that. But I think it's important that the ERC has an opportunity to help in that process. And if nothing else, to help prioritize if there is some prioritization that needs to be done. Also, sports, I had heard like with sports that we might be talking about switching the spring sports to the fall and vice versa. I don't think they've moved forward with that. I don't see how people can play football and maintain the social distancing and the whole respiratory. I don't see it, but I don't know, maybe there's people that are smarter than me that have it figured out. So anyways, those were kind of like some of my comments, but I think we need to, again, work diligently. And Kathy, I think you had requested that we have a weekly meeting as a group. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't just make this a standing weekly meeting at 6 o'clock on Wednesdays. And if anybody has any objections to that, then we can discuss it. So thank you. That's my,
just really quick in regards to football, the issue that I have is that because we're using multiple towns coming together, I feel like that's bringing in perhaps extra germs is not the right word, but just it's bringing in, they're saying that they want us to stay in cohorts. And that's not only not staying in cohorts, that's bringing a whole new town into our town, or actually more than one town into our town. So I know that's not going to make the sports people very happy, but I do think that that is a really high risk that we're putting ourselves at by not only having a sport where you are literally getting someone else's sweat and spit on you, as well as then having children come in from other districts.
I actually had discussed that with somebody who's affiliated with our football program today. Kids coming from over the river, East Hampton, East Haddam, and even the way the design of the summer training and conditioning is with 5 or 10 students, 5 or 10 athletes in the same cohort. But there may be kids who have carpooled from another town. So, but I think that phenomena of we're kind of trying to have a protected, stable cohort, kids are going to be on a different cohort on the bus. If there are other sports that students are playing, like your daughter, if there's some sort of a travel soccer program, and if those are even held, like we're jumping in and out of those stable cohorts in sports and probably in virtually every area. So I think it's a good idea in theory. I think in practice, it will be hard. It will be extraordinarily hard to maintain the fidelity of a cohort and to use it for what it's intended, mitigate the spread and an easier time with contact tracing. I'm not sure that will be achieved.
Yeah, if I might just respond to the policy committee meeting, I think before we go headstrong into scheduling these kinds of meetings, that we should be
very easy exercise in this phenomena is the identification of what's going to be really challenging. And, I know with my administrative team, I have occasionally said, okay, let's pretend we're on a game show and we can win a lot of money if we come up with the best plan. And so we've really tried to lean into, we have a plan now. It's our job to create the action steps so that we can achieve it, whether we agree with it or not. And that our mindset has shifted to an action-based problem-solving paradigm of thought. And so I will come back to the fact that your feedback from your perspective as board members is critically important in this process for all of us. So I think we've come to, can you still not really hear us? You can?
Yeah, we can hear you. It
No,
was
you're
just
fine.
there was some weird, it looked like Bob couldn't hear Norm when Norm was talking and there was like some weird delay. So
I didn't hear what Bob's question. I couldn't hear Bob at all.
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, Bob Moore, no, it was Bob Moore that we couldn't hear at all. And I think Bob Moore was talking while Norm Hicks was talking. And then, I could hear Norm perfectly fine, but then Norm sounded like he could hear Bob and was confused. So I couldn't hear Bob at all, just like a mumble in the background. So Bob Moore, take it from the top.
Can you hear me now? The thing I was just saying is that, there's, in addition to the sport, there's parents and fans that are going to have to be prohibited from being in the stadium as well. So that was all I was saying. Can you hear me?
I didn't hear what you just said. I think you're breaking up pretty bad.
The audio feed is really defective. I understood Bob to say that there are questions about people being in the stands also. Is that fair, Bob?
Norm, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make a brief comment about about policies. While I'm not averse to having policy meetings, I think we need to really reach out to our attorneys and to CABE and get their input. I'm guaranteeing you that Tom Mooney and Vinny Mistero are working on these day in and day out. And before we start to reinvent the wheel, I think it's critical that we reach out to them so we have at least a baseline to work with before we move ahead. I think the policy committee is going to be busy right up until the fall and beyond, because I suspect, as when I did my work with the RESC advisory committee, things just kept coming up as we started to talk, and I think that may be the case here. So I just think we gotta take this in a very organized manner. That's all.
Yeah, and so Norm, I agree with you, and I agree that we shouldn't be writing the policies. I think we need definitely CABE and others to weigh in on them. My point was, I think we need to get the policy committee meetings scheduled and on the calendar now, so that we know when we're going to be meeting, so that it dovetails with all of the other meetings that we're going to be having, so that we can address them in an organized fashion, where we can reach out to CABE and say, look, if you have these policies, these are the dates of our meetings. We'd like to make sure we have the policies and the materials out in advance of those, so that we can discuss them and make the recommendations to the full board, because the policy committee does not work in isolation of the full board, as you're well aware. And I just said, let's get them on the calendar and get them planned. That's what my point was.
So we have a meeting or a webinar with Tom Mooney on Monday, and another one of the attorneys from Shipman. And the purpose of the webinar is guidance relative to the plan after the plan came out. So they will be discussing the area that you're talking about, is giving districts guidance on a number of areas. So that's Monday at 1 o'clock, which is why, I mean, every single day, probably just about every hour, there's new information, new considerations, new challenges. So I think meeting on, keeping a Google Doc that I share with all of you, that, hey, this is what happened today, here's the bullets. And then we also review that at our Wednesday meeting. Something I'd like to suggest, as we've created the plan where we're going to have these kind of the work groups that are focused on certain aspects of the plan, again, right down to things like, what will lunch distribution look like for first graders? What will lunch distribution look like at the middle school? What will the lunch schedule be like? Do we need kids to sweep the floor because we have a little rodent and ant problem here in our two communities? So while we're diminishing, our custodians going in and out of rooms, we got to get these crumbs off the floor in those first grade classrooms where kids eat like Cookie Monster. So in our work groups, we're having very set outcomes, and I think we should do the same for the board. If we're saying ERC is going to convene, we probably want to say that the oversight of ERC related to the reopening will be regarding the allocation of current funds that were kind of budgeted for other reasons, but within that wheelhouse, just so everybody's clear on that. The policy committee, as a work group, what will the outcomes be, or the areas to be addressed for the policy committee for utilization, and then full board. So I think if we schedule and we have those kind of delineated outcomes related to reopening for those subcommittees, that would be helpful for us, and people can contribute to that as well.
Could we also, like on our webpage, start like a COVID drop down?
Say that again.
Could on our webpage, I feel like just one of the drop downs should be COVID, and this way, then it's very easy to find information that I'm sure is going to be coming out over the next 6-8 weeks or so.
So we have that.
Oh, I was just on it. I couldn't find it.
It was right on the top, and it was called, we decided to call it school closure instead of COVID. Just so, and what I just asked Ken to do today was to retitle that reopening. So, and that was just, that it's rather than calling it COVID, it's because it's, so everything related to every decision we've made, resource materials exists there, and we started that in the beginning of March.
Just, can you hear me? Just one other issue is that I'm frozen.
Yeah, how about, what else do you want to say?
Oh, that Vin is.
Can you, Bob is frozen. You should probably get out and come back in. Bob is frozen and pixelated, and I'm just fine. Anyway, Bob just said that Vin from CABE, who we had asked to do a review of all of our policies, I believe, Bob Yamartino, that was something that you had suggested might be a good idea for our board, is to have CABE go through those. And Rebecca had come and met with Norm and you and Bob. And I don't know why somebody's got time on their hands to review policies, but evidently he does. So that's going to get going. Was there anything else, Bob?
No.
Okay. While Bob's trying to sign in, are there any final thoughts? And we'll get. Oh my God, that's crazy. Can you guys hear anything?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Now
Yeah.
we can.
Okay.
Bob,
Any-
Bob sounded like he was 3 or 4 martinis in on some of what I was listening to.
That you were 3 or 4 martinis in.
I think that was Bob's Wi-Fi was 3 or 4 martinis in. But Kath, we can hear you just fine, but for a moment you were muted. The mute symbol came on.
Thanks for letting me know.
Can you hear me now? I just logged back in. No.
No, it's still choppy, Bob.
I'm at school. That's probably why. All right.
I don't know, Bob. Just pour one for me too, okay?
I think that Ken set this up because he wants the board to allocate more money for the internet.
I'm
And
at the office.
it's a setup.
I'm at the office. I can't. All right.
Maybe Bob can go over to Kathy's, if you guys are in the same room, I don't know.
Yeah.
Then we have to put our masks on. Do you want to?
Both sides.
Oh my God, this is crazy. Do you want? What's the next item on the agenda?
The next item is playground.
Oh, good.
Next item is playground. I think before that, we should have a motion to have a weekly meeting.
Okay, is everyone in agreement that we'll schedule a weekly meeting from here on out?
Yes.
Okay.
Board.
Yes.
Okay, with just one item on the agenda. And maybe we can move to the update on from the playground committee.
Okay, yeah, I can give you a quick update on that. So we have had the playground committee meet remotely, and then to discuss the implementation of the playground equipment as per the budget that had been approved in both the town of Middlefield and the Regional School District 13. We had 2 subcommittees formed, one to specify the playground committee for the John Lyman School, one to actually specify the equipment for the Memorial Middle School. And then we went out to bid for the court resurfacing and the court configuration. So I think it's probably best in terms of the Missy Booth has made some really great progress along with the group that was working on John Lyman. So Melissa, why don't you let everyone know the great news about John Lyman, where you stand? I saw the pictures, it's great.
So I went and I did forward the picture to everyone, but we pretty much had 3 different quotes, and me and John Giammatteo and Adrian Dubuc and Mr. Ford had a separate meeting last week. We kind of looked at all of the 3 that we had and asked some kids and kind of came up with the one that we chose. The one that we chose, it ends up being from, it's called Altiplay, and they are actually the ones that also did Peckham, and they're actually doing some stuff over at Allenbrook as well. So they were able to work with us, and they actually even added the balance beam. I don't know if you guys saw that in the first picture, but that was actually a new addition that they were able to add for us without any additional cost. So that was really awesome. And John, me, and Mr. Ford met with them on Monday at John Lyman, and they measured everything out, and they pretty much said that if we didn't order it by this week, they couldn't promise us that it would be done by school. So even though Kim's off this week, she was awesome and got Tippy to do what we needed, and we got it in today. So he promised me it would be done by September 1st. So that was exciting. And after he left John Lyman, that vendor also went over to Memorial. And even though Deb Stone was off this week and Mr. Ford was off this week, so that was awesome that they both took time out of their time off to be there. But the guy also met with Deb Stone after, and so they're getting some preliminary plans together for Memorial, but that likely won't be done when school begins, but they will have a plan in place. I guess some of their swings just got condemned. So they're talking about reworking that area where the swings and the other thing are. So yay. And I think we should have a ribbon cutting when it's open.
I agree. So one thing that we had discussed was process. So I did want people to understand, because the playground the committee was working with vendors that were already approved on the state contract, it wasn't necessary to go out for competitive bid, because all of the quotes they would give us would be under state guidelines and state existing contracts, which means that they're at the lower prices. So that allows the committee then to go forward and request the business office submit the purchase orders. We did ask if, Bob and I did discuss if the actual selection of the committee should come back to the Board of Education for review and vote, but determined that based on the fact that the committee already had the authorization from the board to go forward, and we had a subcommittee with a lot of input from teachers, administration, parents, and board members that were present on those committees, that step wasn't necessary. As for the court resurfacing, that one does require competitive bid, and since the competitive bid process takes well over a month, by the time you prepare the bid package, submit it, get them back, and then select the vendor, that package was put together and submitted based on some preliminary quotes and designs that we had put forward. So we're still waiting to get those quotes back. The bid package actually went out earlier this week. I think Monday it actually went out, or was it last week, Kathy? Last few days it went out. So we do have the bid package officially out. It's being worked, and that's for the courts. So when we get the feedback on Memorial's playground, we will then submit the purchase order. So that's pretty much where we ended up. So does anyone have any questions about that? It's all exciting and it's moving forward. So any questions?
I just thought it looked really great what the committee picked out. I was like, oh, that looks like a lot of fun. I mean, if I was excited, I'm sure the kids will be.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of happy kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's exciting.
Sorry.
No, Melissa, go.
I was just going to say, it is being installed, so it can be moved eventually if that is what needs to be done. But that is going to be a hefty price when that happens. But we're happy with what we have, I think. And I think the couple kids I've showed it to, they're like, are you kidding me? I showed it to one girl who just graduated from 4th grade and she goes, that's not fair. So yeah, they're going to be ecstatic with what they get, I think.
Yeah. Well, one or two more points. One, Melissa and John worked very closely with the vendor, and one of the concerns everyone had was the existing footings need to be removed, and we weren't sure how we were going to handle that or the cost of that. And the vendor that was chosen said they would take care of that for us. So that's a huge plus. I mean, that's a win. The other point that you're going to find is that the playground selection for the Memorial Middle School will be slightly different because that committee also feels it's important to integrate like the Gaga pit and a few other things in. So a portion of the funding will be allocated towards that. They're also looking towards Eagle Scouts to build Eagle Scout projects and do it that way, because they also want to create a walking path around the school. And we have an individual who's donating a gazebo for the back area where the current garden is. So there's a lot of exciting things happening so that when the kids do go back to school, they'll have facilities available. And earlier on in the process, after budgets were approved, a question was raised: should we move forward with the playground equipment, given that the schools may not reopen? And Bob Moore felt strongly, and I agree with him, that we needed to do it in the eventuality that the schools did come back. And now we're in a situation where we are going to have students back in the school in September. So that was a great call to get that moving early and to keep it moving. So again, thanks, Bob, for your leadership, and thanks to all of you for supporting this and having this move forward. And Melissa, the work you've been doing has been fantastic. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bob and Melissa. You did a great job, and the committee worked really well together.
I hope we're not releasing the audio of this meeting.
He froze again.
Is it okay if someone says that? I think we could probably, what's next? Communications? Or does like Bob officially have to say that? I don't know the rules. That's, hey, newly elected secretary. What's
Anybody can say that. Next item on the agenda are communications. So does anyone have any communications?
the only one I got? I'm not sure if everyone else got this letter, but I got the letter from an unknown person. It was not signed, about radio frequencies in cell phone towers.
I have a feeling that, did everyone get that?
I thought so.
I got
I
it.
just wanted to be recorded that we did get it.
Good, thank you, Christine.
I'll have to check my mail. I don't think I got it.
It didn't come directly to your house. It went to the central office. The central office remailed it. There, Lucy's
for
got
you,
it.
Missy, if you'd like a good read.
Yes. Anybody else with Victor?
Am I back or not?
I'd like a good read too.
Ken, it just says on my computer, it says your internet is unstable.
I have communication. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, I'm at Kathy's computer. We got a thank you note from TJ Islip, the young man that we gave the scholarship to, and it was a very nice note from him and from his parents as well. We also we got a long letter from Juan Stefan. I think everybody got that, with a lot of medical information related to the importance of getting kids together. I also have a note from Chip Dumas, the selection the firm that we selected to do the search, he's offering to have 1 or 2 board members sit on a training program for that psychological evaluation program that he had that was an option. So we could, anybody who wants to do that, it's 6 Tuesdays for 2 hours, starting next week. So I just don't think I have the time, but it's that training program that he was talking about, on the third option, we went with the second option. But if anybody wants to do that, let me know. It'll be 6 weeks, Tuesday nights from 2 hours plus, training on how to do that psychological evaluation of an employee. So if anybody is interested, you can read that proposal, and it's in there what the course is going to be like, but it's a big commitment over the summer. And I think I've started to get letters now on reopening from different parents. One from Scott Silver, one from Heidi Pizzo, and I'm starting to get letters daily from parents who are concerned about reopening.
Is there a way to have those letters circulated? Are they coming through your email, Bob, or?
They're coming directly to me as a request. I can send them to you if you like.
Yeah, I always just like reading them because I think it gives you a sense of what the community's feeling. So
yeah, I can send you my answer as well.
You don't have to do that.
So those are the ones that are coming in. Did you get the one from Juan Stefan?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I won't send you that one.
Hey, Bob,
Yeah.
maybe, I know Andrew said it wasn't necessary to see your response, but understanding your position on the issues is not a bad thing for us.
Sure.
And rather than just circulate the letters to us, when you respond to the person, if you BCC'd us, we could see the letter and your response. And then do it in one thing if you just wanted to do a BCC to us.
Yeah.
I think
I don't know. I'd rather just send you after the fact that I send it, so that not copied that way. So it's directly. It's not that hard. It's just another email. And I have a new Chromebook now, so maybe it'll go slower or faster. We'll see. It doesn't work too well in the meeting. I know. So that was all I had for communications. Any other comments? Again, we had a very good turnout at the elections and had a lot of comments from people walking in and out, and a lot of congratulations that night. So for all 3 of you, all 4 or 5 of us. So those are great. If there's other comments, we have time for public comment. Ken, if anybody's on there.
Yes, we have one person that's called in. If you would like to speak, please dial *9 to indicate so. They're not doing their raising the hand thing by dialing *9. They may just be listening in.
Okay.
Jeremy, you want to say anything to us?
You're assuming it's Jeremy. All right, if there's no comment, we'll have a meeting. We'll schedule a meeting every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And I'll schedule if you give me dates for policy, Bob and Norm, give me some dates for that.
Yes, we'll do that.
Christine, I'll give you dates for ERC, okay? And we also need a student achievement.
All right, we'll check with Corey. We'll check with Corey on that.
All right.
And set something up with Corey.
So we'll be seeing quite a bit of each other this summer. bring your laptops on vacation because we'll be staying in touch. So
I'm on
thank you,
vacation now.
everybody. Huh?
I'm on vacation now. I'm up in New Hampshire.
Good.
So,
We need a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
A
second.
All in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.